Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Moose Henderson. If you're a longtime viewer of my channel, you know that anytime I try to purchase property, it turns into a train wreck. Now, I'm pretty impulsive and I tend to do things my own way, so this is certainly not a case of do what I say, not what I do. Probably don't want to do what I say, and you certainly don't want to do what I do. But nonetheless, let's get on with the story of my attempted purchase in Tennessee and my eventual purchase somewhere else of some property. Now, I really wanted to move up into Tennessee. I'm currently living up here in a room that I'm renting. I have friends that live up here. It's relatively close to my family, and I found some property up here that I really liked. The first piece of property that I tried to close on, I had some issues because the gentleman had liens on the title, and so that canceled the sale. And then I found another piece of property I like, which was right down the road, but I ran into issues there because the rock layer is very close to the ground level and it would not pass a conventional perc test, so would not be able to install a conventional septic. Now, there are septic systems you can install on lands that will not perc, but they're more expensive and I don't have the financial resources to get into a piece of property like that. So both of those properties here in Tennessee fell through. And in the process of trying to purchase property in Tennessee, of course, I looked over all of the rules and regulations for the state of Tennessee, the requirements for building permits, the requirements to have running water at your home, the requirements to have a septic, the fact that any water coming out of your home, whether from a kitchen sink or a bathroom sink, is classified as sewage, not as gray water, and the fact that you're pretty much not allowed to have a composting toilet in Tennessee. Only one type of toilet, two different brands, is allowed in Tennessee, and the cost of the toilet is anywhere from 1800s plus. Now, I understand that anytime you live in the South, you're going to get a certain element of the population that is less desirable because it's easier to live in an area with a moderate climate and to either abuse drugs or live in a way that is not so much community appropriate. Cars turned upside down in the driveway and things such as that. I lived in Georgia for a while and I'm very familiar with how some of the outlying areas can look. And I prefer things to be nice and tidy. Of course, if you live in an upscale neighborhood in houses that cost anywhere from $300 to $1 million, you tend to live in a neighborhood that is going to be more in tune with that type of thinking. When you tend to own property that is much less expensive or out in the sticks, you tend to get in areas where you may get people who want to live in a less tidy sort of way. So after striking out in Tennessee, I decided to look in some of the areas where I have lived in the past and try and find a home. And I've lived in quite a few places, some of those down south. And I tend to like cooler temperatures or cold temperatures, and I don't do well in heat, even though I've been in the deep south for quite a few years now. So I started to look in areas like Wyoming, Nebraska, and up in Michigan, where I've lived before. I went online and looked at some of the things that come up from a Google search, and one of the sites that came up is a place called Online Land Sales, and they sell a lot of off-grid type property, unrestricted type property in parts of the country at very economical down payments. And as you folks know, I don't have a whole bunch of money to throw at this. So while looking at that, I found some properties up in Michigan, and I've lived up in Michigan before for a total of about 15 years or more and really loved it up there. And so I decided, hey, why not take a look at Michigan again? And the properties that they had for sale were in an area of upper Michigan, not upper peninsula, but the upper part of what's called the Mitten, the main part of the main portion of Michigan that contains Ann Arbor, Detroit, Lansing, and so on. But this was up towards the north end of that in a little town called Gaylord, and a subdivision known as Lakes of the North. I kind of liked it. The price was attractive. I liked the feel of the area, and so I jumped in my car and drove up there and looked at the property, and it checked off all of my type of requirements for being a nice place and not too populated and a beautiful area and a good climate. Well, not what most people would consider a good climate. They had 240 inches of snow last year, but it is what I would consider a good climate. And so I drove back home. That was a round trip of about 1,600 miles, and placed an offer in on the property and started to do my due diligence. In the process of doing my due diligence, I came across the fact that this particular company has a number of negative type of complaints with the Better Business Bureau, and it kind of caused me to take a pause and go, do I really want to get involved with a company with this many issues with the BBB? Now, I did go through and read the complaints with the Better Business Bureau, and the majority of them have been satisfied in an acceptable manner at least to the Better Business Bureau. A lot of them not satisfied in an acceptable manner to the customers. But I got to thinking, do I really want to get involved with something that could become a real issue? So I started looking in this area for other offers of land, especially in this same area. And I found that the homeowners association in this particular subdivision known as Lakes of the North had a number of properties they were selling themselves. And the properties were at about a third of the price of what online land sales was offering. Now, I understand that online land sales makes money by selling properties and financing them. And in order to finance with these attractive rates, they charge a little bit more interest, and they add a bit onto what would be the expected selling price for their profit margin and things like that. But as it turned out, I could purchase roughly the same piece of land that online land sales was selling for a little over $5,000. I could purchase for $2,000 by going directly through the homeowners association. Well, before driving up there, I did a little bit of background checking and things like that because I didn't want to make another round trip for nothing. And the homeowners association checked out well with no complaints. And I also did a little bit of investigation about this particular subdivision, and it's approximately 100,000 acres in size. It's divided up into approximately 10,000 home sites, and of the 10,000 home sites, only about 1,000 people live in this area. So it's an area that has been around for quite some time, and many people have purchased in this area with plans of retiring because the prices were attractive, but very few people have actually moved into the area. I kind of suspect because as people get older, they tend to want to move south, not into an area with this much snow. And I realize a lot of the people who purchased here probably lived in the area of Michigan and Minnesota, Upper Peninsula, the southern part of Canada, and so on. But I can also understand why a lot of people decide to just go ahead and sell their property or give it back to the HOA because, one, it was a fairly low investment to begin with, and then two, the HOA fees every year, whether you live on the property or not, add up pretty quickly. So I got back in my car and I drove back up to Michigan. And of course, this is during the autumn and the colors are just extraordinary when you start getting up past the Detroit area. And I really enjoyed the drive going up there. I didn't enjoy sitting in a seat for another 10 hours, but the colors themselves made the drive very worthwhile. I stopped by the HOA office and got a list of properties that are for sale. And I talked to the lady who's in charge of selling the properties for the HOA, and she gave me some recommendations based on my desire to be off on my own and backed up to the woods and kind of off grid, so to speak. Using her recommendations, I went and looked at some of these properties and I found a couple of them that I really liked. These properties are roughly a third to a half an acre in size, and there were two properties side by side that I could purchase for $2,000 a piece, and these two properties combined came to 3/4 of an acre. At first, I was only going to purchase one of the properties, but once I started laying out where I would like to have the house and the trees I did not want to cut and things such as that, it turned out that I was kind of occupying the two properties, so I decided to buy both of the properties. So I have closed on the properties and I have done all of my due diligence, and properties now belong to me. And I'm in the process of going through the procedures of having the two properties surveyed. And then I'll be putting in the applications for building permit and tree cutting permits. Since this does belong to an HOA, there are certain requirements you have to abide by in order to do things. I have carefully read through the covenants, and although the requirements are a pain in the neck, they do also protect me from other people going through and just clear cutting land and stuff like that. So even though I don't like having to do a lot of applications to architectural committees and stuff like that, I do understand the need for it, and it does come through and actually protect me also. So we're going to be going back up there very soon and laying out for the driveway and laying out for the area that I'll need to clear for the house and things such as that. I hope you have enjoyed, as I am finding my last piece of property, my home that I'm going to retire on. And from this, we're going to be building my off-grid cabin, my workshop, an observatory, and so on. So thanks so much for joining us. If you would, please give me that thumbs up icon or like a roo, and we'll see you back here again on Moose Villa Off-Grid very soon. Thank you so much. Goodbye.